The mission was a success. That is the first thing you need to understand. Everything that happened afterward, every document shredded, every record sealed, every conversation that ended with a threat disguised as a reminder of your obligations, all of it happened after a mission that went exactly according to plan. The target was eliminated. The objective was achieved. Your team came home. 6 men, all alive. The first time in 4 years that everyone came back. You landed at a base you are not allowed to name in a country that will not acknowledge you were ever there. You were debriefed by 3 men whose names you were never given. You signed a form. You were told you would be recognized for what you had done. That was the last true thing anyone in the United States government said to you. What they did next had a name inside the classified budgeting system that authorized it. The name was Program Dissolution, Asset Protection. What it meant, in language that didn't require a security clearance to understand, was this: you knew too much, and knowledge, in the government's calculation, is a liability with a cost. They had already calculated what it would cost to manage you. You need to understand what the mission was before you can understand what the government did afterward. 18 months earlier, your unit had been activated for an operation so compartmentalized that even your commanding officer only knew the first phase. The target was a network, not a single individual, but an infrastructure of relationships between a foreign government, 3 private financial institutions, us and a series of shell companies that had been moving money in ways that were embarrassing to people in Washington who could not afford to be embarrassed. This was not a counterterrorism operation. This was not about protecting American lives. This was about protecting American interests, which is a different thing entirely, and the distinction matters more than almost anything else in this story. You were not told this at the time. You were told what you needed to be told to do the job. You were told the target represented a threat to national security. You were given a briefing that was technically accurate in every detail and completely misleading in its framing. You believed it. 6 of you believed it enough to spend 14 months in preparation, 7 weeks in theater, and 43 minutes, executing an operation that achieved every objective on the classified mission parameters. The objectives were achieved. The people those objectives actually served were not the ones you had been told about. The first sign was the promotion. Your team leader, a man named Reeves, who had 17 years of service and 3 previous commendations, had been verbally told before the mission that successful completion would result in advancement. That conversation happened in front of 2 witnesses. After the mission, the advancement did not come. When Reeves inquired through official channels, he was told there had been a paperwork issue, then a budget freeze, then a restructuring of the evaluation cycle. He waited 8 months before accepting that the paperwork issue was permanent. The second sign was the medal ceremony. A ceremony had been scheduled. Not public. Classified operations don't get public ceremonies, but an internal recognition event. The kind that happens in rooms without windows, with a handful of people who are authorized to know what you did. The ceremony was scheduled, then postponed, then rescheduled, then cancelled entirely with a 2-line email that cited operational security concerns without explaining how a private ceremony for 6 men in a secure facility represented an operational security concern. You understood then what the 2-line email actually meant. It meant that recognizing what you had done required acknowledging that you had done it. And acknowledging that you had done it created a record. And a record created accountability. And accountability was the one thing the people who authorized this mission could not afford. 3 months after the mission, you were called in for what was described as a routine security review. The room had 2 men in it you had never met. They were not in uniform. They did not introduce themselves by name. One of them slid a document across the table and said, in a tone that was perfectly professional and contained no specific threat whatsoever, that your continued eligibility for your security clearance depended on your signature. The document was 47 pages long. You had 40 minutes to read it. The document stated, in language that required 3 readings to fully understand, that you had no first-hand knowledge of any operation conducted between March and October of the previous year, that any belief you held that you had participated in such an operation was the result of training simulations and could not be distinguished under oath from actual operational experience, that you acknowledged the psychological literature on false memory formation in high-stress environments, that you agreed to seek mental health support should you experience confusion between simulated and actual events. They were not asking you to lie. They were giving you the legal architecture to believe, if you chose to, that you couldn't remember the difference between what had happened and what hadn't. One of the men said, "This protects you as much as it protects the program." The other man said nothing. He just looked at you in a way that completed the sentence the first man had started. You signed it. All 6 of you signed it. Because the alternative to signing it was not explained. And the things that are not explained in rooms like that one are always worse than the things that are. There is a man on your team named Marcus. Marcus has a daughter named Lily. She was 7 years old when the mission began and 8 years old when it ended. While you were in theater for 7 weeks, Lily had a part in her school's spring performance. She played a tree, which Marcus considered the best possible role because trees don't have lines, and Lily, according to Marcus, inherited his inability to memorize anything under pressure. Marcus missed the performance. He had told Lily before he left that he was going away for work. Not what work, not where, just away for work. Back soon. And he would see the video. His wife had filmed it on her phone. When Marcus came home, they watched it together on the couch. Lily, her mother, and Marcus in civilian clothes that didn't quite fit anymore after 7 weeks of operational weight fluctuation. And Lily explained every scene to him as if he hadn't been watching, as if narrating it made his absence from the room retroactively less complete. Marcus told his wife he had been on a training exercise. He had signed a document that made this technically defensible. His wife, who had been married to him for 11 years and knew every register of his voice, did not ask follow-up questions. Lily is 12 now. Marcus has still never told her where he actually was. He never will. The medical benefits denial came 14 months after the mission. The 2 members of your team had developed symptoms consistent with what the VA's own literature describes as operational stress injury, the clinical term for what happens to the human nervous system after extended high-intensity operations. One of them had trouble sleeping, not occasionally, every night for 14 months, in a way that was affecting his marriage, his ability to drive, and his performance at the civilian job he had taken because the military career path that had been verbally promised to him had quietly closed. He applied for treatment through the standard VA process. The application required documentation of the operational experiences that had caused the injury. The documentation of those operational experiences was classified at a level he was no longer authorized to access. His own medical history was classified above his own security clearance. The VA denied his application, not because they doubted he was injured, because the injury could not be formally attributed to a cause that could be formally acknowledged. The denial letter used language about insufficient documentation that was technically accurate and completely understood by everyone involved to mean something else entirely. It meant, "We know what happened to you. We cannot say we know. Therefore, we cannot help." The second member of your team tried a different approach. He hired a lawyer. The lawyer received a phone call. The lawyer withdrew from the case. No explanation was given. None was needed. Here is what the mission actually accomplished. The network that was dismantled had been channeling money through financial instruments that were creating complications for a series of negotiations that 3 senior government officials needed to conclude successfully before a specific congressional deadline. The operation eliminated those complications. The negotiations concluded. The officials received credit for a diplomatic achievement that was publicly attributed to patient statecraft and privately understood to have been enabled by 6 men in a country no one will name. Those 3 officials are still in their positions. 2 of them have received commendations since the mission. None of them have ever been in the same room as any of the 6 men who made their achievement possible. The calculation the government made was not cruel in the way people imagine cruelty. It was not personal. It was not malicious. It was a cost-benefit analysis conducted by people who think in systems, and in the system they were operating, 6 men with classified knowledge of an operation that could not be acknowledged represented a liability whose management cost, benefits, recognition, the ongoing risk of disclosure exceeded the value of honoring the obligation that had been implicitly made to them. Not because the men weren't valuable, because the operation's political value depended entirely on the operation never having happened, and men who are honored for a mission are evidence that the mission occurred. Evidence is the one thing a deniable operation cannot afford to leave. Marcus watches Lily at her school events now. He hasn't missed one since he came back. Not a recital, not a graduation, not a parent-teacher conference. He is there for all of it. His wife has stopped asking why he needs to be there for everything, because she understands, in the way partners of people who do this work come to understand things without being told, that his presence at every ordinary moment is not about the moments themselves. It is about what he traded those moments for, and what he received in return. The 6 men are all out of service now. Not all by choice. 2 were eased out through the kind of administrative processes that are difficult to challenge and impossible to prove were intentional. 1 retired on his own terms, which is to say, he left before the terms were made worse. 3 are in various stages of the VA appeals process that has been ongoing for years and has not yet produced a single approved claim. And none of them have spoken publicly. The document they signed in that room ensures they likely never will. There is a word for what the government did to these men. The word is not betrayal, though betrayal is part of it. The word is not abandonment, though abandonment is part of it too. The word is calculation. They were calculated, measured against what they knew, what they might say, what it would cost to honor them versus what it would cost to manage them. And the calculation came out the same way it always comes out when the people doing the calculating are not the people bearing the cost.